Nothing loves the history, spirit, and concept of territory-era professional wrestling like Mega Cat Studios' WrestleQuest. Every line of dialogue and pixel of art pays effusive homage to the colorful grapplers of yesteryear that is borderline saccharine. But witty writing and some fun characters dilute all the sweetness and prevent it from becoming too much to bear. It's also clear that WrestleQuest absolutely loves old-school, turn-based RPGs like Final Fantasy, but in the case of the slow-paced combat, plotting dungeons, and basic usability features that haven't kept pace with the recent decades of game design, I wish it loved contemporary role-playing games a bit more.
When the chips are down, I'll take my shot.
You could also call Toy Story another heavy influence for WrestleQuest in that the interweaving stories of its two main plastic protagonists, Randy Savage's love letter Muchacho Man and Bret Hart doppelganger Brink Logan, take place in the sprawling world of the Toy Box. This miniature world is a series of interconnected playsets that house action figure superstars. Each new region, be it a jungle-themed board game a la Jumanji, or a playset styled after a dusty Mexican city, double as wrestling promotions, each with their own champions, politics, and cultures. WrestleQuest's sort of everything is wrestling approach hits more than it misses. The story of the Honest Bucks tag team slowly growing apart on their quest to achieve stardom and honor their family lineage is a strong thread that runs through much of the adventure, even if it drags you through diversions that feel more like busy work than meaningful plot developments or twists. This is in contrast with Muchacho Man's less compelling quest to be the Toy Box's best wrestler, and slowly finding out the hard way why that's unlikely to happen.
You dare doubt the girth of our coziness, yeah?
Sadly, the flimsy plot fails its attempt to hide the go here, fight this nature of WrestleQuest's design under narrative facement. The flaws stick out most when control switches back and forth between these two groups of heroes, often abruptly stopping the flow of one story to make incremental progress in another. The small bright spots of genuinely touching story and character play pop up consistently enough to pull through over the almost 40-hour tale, though.
It's prime time, folks.
Overall, the main event of every new region, and the stories told throughout, is a gallery of colorful and often silly characters. If they aren't obvious references to famous grapplers like the vitamin-poppin', leg-droppin' Brooder,
I've got something to tell you, brother.
or real-life legends like Diamond Dallas Page and Sergeant Slaughter, they are collages of stereotypical wrestling personalities crossed with other sci-fi and pop culture icons. The dozen or so that are playable all fit various archetypical wrestling forms: strongmen, high flyers, microphone benches, etc. They also fit seamlessly into the archetypical RPG classes like healers, damage-focused mages, and big-bodied bruisers, among others.
Time for sleep.
As is tradition with the 2D RPG of yesteryear, your party of misfits travels the world through towns and dungeons, some of which look pretty great visually thanks to the iron claw it has on the Saturday morning cartoon style and dazzling use of color. The Toy Box's various promotions are realized through the lens of role-playing games and a toy store in the same creative and charming way that Paper Mario is for RPGs and a craft store. Except here, that's layered with wrestling Easter eggs in a way that is more than just simple decoration. Towns and dungeons cohesively meld all three of these themes brilliantly. I just wish there was more interesting things to do in them outside of buying the next tier of gear or healing up. Dungeons have lots of obstacles, traps, and puzzles littered among them, so navigating them isn't so mindless. Some are so short you wonder why even put them in your way in the first place, though. Conversely, many outstay their welcome and feel like slogs full of every old cliche imaginable. Occasionally, you need to split the party up into multiple teams, each having to navigate different parts of the dungeon, hitting switches to raise bridges or knocking down searchlights to grant safe passage for the rest of the crew. These definitely break up the monotony, but if any old school 16-bit RPG dungeons could ever have been called thrilling, WrestleQuest isn't an homage to any of them. There's a handful of times when WrestleQuest tries to break the mold completely with minigames that ask you to dance at a go-go bar with BDR-style rhythm mechanics, or wage war at sea with a battleship-style minigame. I appreciated the effort to change things up, but these were largely bungled messes for me, and the ones that are mandatory to progress were particularly frustrating choke points.
I'll never go in guns a-blazing.
Party members gain lots of synergy as they level up with gimmicks, aka spells and abilities, that play off of one another. Brink Logan, for instance, can cause enemies to be fatigued. Stag Logan has an antler bomb that does massive amounts of damage to fatigued enemies. They also gain tag team and triple team moves similar to Chrono Trigger, where different combinations of characters can stack their turns up to unleash big time attacks, but a lot of them felt niche and too expensive compared to sticking to some basic reliable gimmick combos. That goes the same for summons, which are fun to watch but are rarely game changers. There's also the hype meter, a momentum bar shared between both allies and enemies, tugging back and forth between you via your combat actions. Gaining hype through taunts or certain attacks gives your squad passive buffs like regenerating health or greater strength, but lose enough hype and the opposite can be true. Of course, maintaining hype becomes truly effortless once you figure out how each character best gains it. Most importantly though, many of your attack options, be they basic strikes or gimmicks, require timing-based button inputs to maximize damage or to tack on additional effects. These aren't very demanding, but longer battles could feel slow due to its classic turn-based style lacking the option to speed up or skip attack animations, and WrestleQuest lacks any auto battle feature whatsoever. All told, I much prefer it over the alternative of simply selecting moves and watching attacks flash passively. You can separate the kinds of battles you'll partake in into 3 types. The first are low-level monsters that can usually be beat up handily if you're evenly leveled, but can feel very repetitive quickly. The second are boss battles, usually consisting of parties of other wrestlers or big monsters with special features and mechanics. These felt like the true sweet spot of combat challenge, asking you to dig a little deeper into your bag of tricks by hitting your party relentlessly. The third are similar to boss battles, but they're usually one-on-one bouts between one of your protagonists and a big bad high-ranking member of the region's local promotional hierarchy. These matches sometimes give you opportunities to make custom entrances for yourself to gain hype bonuses. An interesting feature you'll learn about rather early on, but will play for hours before you use with any regularity. Boss fights often feature special objectives called dramatic moments here that ask you to play differently for additional rewards. These are usually counterintuitive, often asking you to lose hype or let enemies kick out of pins in order to heighten the back and forth, but well-optimized teams are going to have a problem with this. I usually skip them, but certain boss battles make them mandatory, and these are usually the worst fights in all of WrestleQuest. There's a bunch of other smaller annoyances too. The minimap isn't a map, it's just a set of markers floating in a void, like Bray Wyatt's lantern in the darkness, and it can get you lost just as often as it points the way. There's also a surprising amount of information that is just not readily available. If you want to know a monster's remaining HP before you attack it, if they're strong or weak to certain attack elements, or what constitutes a physical attack or not, you might as well have been blinded by Muda's mist.
Such machismo.
WrestleQuest is truly an earnest attempt at telling an authentic wrestling tale in an old-school RPG format. Competent combat mechanics add flair and depth to a usually pretty banal aspect of this style of game, but much of that depth feels easy to ignore. And the parts that aren't, namely dramatic moments, supply the opposite of a fun challenge. Likewise, it may take a bit of fighting spirit to make it through the slow and arduous dungeons and some of the bloated and jarring plot, yet it captures the intrepid lives of people who travel the world, beating each other up for fame and fortune in charming and touching ways that is enhanced by its Toy Story style innocence. For being the first attempt at telling a pro wrestling tale in such a story-forward medium, WrestleQuest is championship material, but maybe just a mid-card title. For more, check out our reviews of Double Dragon Gaiden Rise of the Dragons and Dave the Diver. And for everything else, stick with IGN.